You're listening to the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast. Role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons provide players with a unique opportunity to step into the shoes of characters and make decisions that impact the game world. One of the most intriguing aspects of these games are the moral choices that players face. At the beginning, a party often portrays virtuous heroes who uphold justice and fight evil. But what happens when the allure of darkness or the allure of personal gain tempts them to cross the line? I'm Robert Walker, author of Session Zero, the DMG to writing great campaigns in any system, and this is my show where I teach collaborative storytellers how to have more immersive campaigns using psychology. And today we're going to delve into the fascinating world of role-playing games, exploring the psychology behind moral choices. Specifically, we're going to examine the journey from being a hero to embracing the darker side as a villain within the context of role-playing games. So grab your dice and join me on this adventure into the human psyche. To explore this topic, I want to look at three key psychological factors that contribute to players making moral choices in RPGs. Those are moral flexibility, personal agency, and narrative immersion. First, moral flexibility refers to the ability to adapt and adjust one's moral compass in different situations or contexts. It involves being open to considering alternative perspectives, reevaluating moral judgments, and potentially making choices that deviate from societal norms or personal beliefs. In the context of a game like D&D or any other RPG, moral flexibility becomes an intriguing aspect of gameplay. In role-playing games, players create and portray characters with their own set of moral values, ethics, and motivations. These characters interact with a richly developed game world, encountering diverse situations that require them to make decisions with moral implications. The game offers players complex dilemmas where there might not be a clear-cut or right or wrong answer, and they offer a unique environment for players to explore their own moral flexibility because they're detached from real-life consequences. Players can experiment with different moral perspectives, test the boundaries of their characters' values, and even play morally ambiguous or villainous roles. This freedom allows players to delve into the psychological exploration of what it means to make difficult moral choices and experience the consequences of those decisions. By embodying characters with varying moral outlooks, players can gain insights into different ethical frameworks and challenge their own preconceptions. They might find themselves torn between conflicting choices, wrestling with the consequences of their actions, or grappling with the motivations behind the character's shifting moral compass. And in role-playing games, a skilled dungeon master can encourage players to think deeply about their character's beliefs, motivations, and personal growth. It can invite them to consider the complex factors that influence moral decision-making, like personal desires, loyalty to allies, preservation of life, and pursuit of justice, even the allure of power. As players navigate through your game and are faced with moral choices, they can reflect on how their characters' decisions align or diverge from their own moral stances and what that reveals about their own moral flexibility as individuals. Ultimately, moral flexibility in role-playing games provides a safe space to explore the nuances of morality, expand a person's capacity for empathy, and gain a deeper understanding of the complexities inherent in ethical decision-making. It allows your players to step into the shoes of their characters and experience the consequences of bad choices, fostering personal growth and self-reflection in the process. Now, personal agency, on the other hand, refers to an individual sense of control, of autonomy, and the ability to make decisions that shape their own actions and experiences. In the context of role-playing games, Personal agency plays a significant role when a good character goes bad. When players create their characters, they are often given a great deal of agency over the development of their character and choices. They have the freedom to determine their backstory, their personal traits, their moral compass, and even the physical and other stats of the character, like what heritage or what species are they playing. As the game progresses, the players navigate their characters through various encounters and situations, making these moral decisions. When a good character goes bad in a role-playing game, personal agency becomes central to that narrative. The player, as the agent controlling the character's action, has the power to guide their character's moral trajectory. This transformation from a virtuous hero to a morally ambiguous or even villainous character can be influenced by several factors. First, personal desires and motivations can drive the character shift towards darker paths. Perhaps the character becomes disillusioned with the constraints of the previous moral code, or feels compelled to pursue personal gain, revenge, or power. Personal agency allows the player to make choices that align with these changing motivations, gradually shifting the character's moral alignment. Secondly, the interactions and relationships the character forms within the game world can influence their moral choices. The character might be influenced by morally ambiguous allies or powerful antagonists or tempting offers that challenge their existing values. The player agency enables them to decide how their character is going to respond to these influences, whether succumbing to the darker temptations or striving to maintain their virtuous path. And furthermore, personal agency allows players to explore the psychological complexities of their character as they grapple with their moral descent. They can delve into the internal conflicts, rationalizations, and justifications that the character experiences as they justify their increasingly questionable actions. This exploration of personal agency in the context of the character's moral transformation adds depth and complexity to the game's storytelling. It provides unique opportunity for players to examine the consequences of the character's choices and how personal agency influences moral journey. It also allows them to reflect on their own desires, values, and ethical boundaries as they are navigating a character's path from good to bad. The exploration of personal agency in this context can promote personal real-world self-reflection, empathy, and deeper understanding of human capacity for both light and darkness. And finally, narrative immersion refers to when players become deeply engaged in the story. We have talked about this idea a lot in this podcast, and that is because narrative immersion for me is one of the most important parts about having a great campaign. Characters and your world of role-playing game all add to narrative immersion. It involves a sense of being absorbed in the game's story, experiencing the emotional connections with characters, and feeling invested in the outcomes of the character choices. When it comes to moral choices in role-playing games, narrative immersion can have a profound impact, especially in the context of heroes becoming villains. In games, players often develop a strong attachment to their characters and the game world. They invest their time and effort into crafting the character's backstory, personality, and values, and forging a connection that goes beyond mere gameplay. As the narrative unfolds, players become emotionally invested in their character's journey, experiencing their triumphs, struggles, and having to struggle personally with the character's moral dilemmas. This immersion in the narrative creates a powerful psychological connection between the player and the character that they're portraying. And as players make decisions for their character, they often align those choices with the character's development and growth. This means that when a hero character is faced with a morally challenging situation, the player's emotional investment and immersion in the narrative can influence that decision-making. Narrative immersion can make players more inclined to make choices that align with their character's evolving personality, motivations, or internal conflict. For instance, a hero that faces a personal tragedy, a betrayal, or a gradual erosion of hope, the player's immersion can lead them to explore the character's descent into darkness or along a morally ambiguous path. They may be even compelled to make choices that reflect the character's changing worldview, even if that means crossing moral boundaries. Moreover, narrative immersion can evoke empathy and understanding for the character's struggles and temptations. Players might find themselves justifying or rationalizing their character's morally questionable decisions based on the emotional investment that they've made in the narrative. This empathic connection can make it easier for players to embrace a perspective of their character, blurring the lines between the player's personal moral values and the moral values of their character. The immersion in the narrative also amplifies the impact of character choices. So, as players witness the consequences of their character's action within the game world, they experience a heightened sense of agency and responsibility for those characters. The weight of these choices can evoke a strong emotional response, leading players to make decisions that have a lasting impact on the character's moral alignment and the overall narrative of the story and the trajectory of the plot. In the context of heroes becoming villains, narrative immersion can provide players with a captivating, transformative experience. It allows them to explore the complexities of their character's moral journey and the motivations that drive them into deeper darkness, and ultimately what the consequences of those choices are going to be. This immersion deepens the player's engagement with the story, fostering a more nuanced and emotionally resonant gameplay experience. So, in conclusion, with narrative immersion, RPGs influencing moral choices by fostering emotional investment and shaping decision making and understanding and amplifying the impact of those choices. When heroes become villains, narrative immersion provides players a powerful platform to explore the intricacies of what a moral transformation looks like and helps them delve into the psychological depths of their characters, helping create that rich and immersive storytelling experience. Now, as a game master, I have witnessed players struggle with moral choices. To be 100% honest, it's often because I like to put moral choices and difficult moral dilemmas in the path of my players, because I sort of like watching the players out of character struggle with what their in character, the character they're portraying in the game would do. Some players willingly embrace villainy, while others feel conflicted and guilty about crossing moral boundaries. It is fascinating to observe how these choices affect the dynamics between players and the overall trajectory of the game and the game experience. These experiences show us how RPGs can provide a unique avenue for exploring our own ethical frameworks and complexities of human nature. So, whether you're a player or a game master, what is really important if you are going to embrace a game or run a game that involves a fall from good, so to speak, and descent into evil, is you should take a moment to reflect on how it aligns with your own values and explore the psychological impact of your choices. But moreover, it is really important that the entire game group is consenting to this type of a story. We talked about several episodes ago about the value of embracing darker stories and how to safely engage darker stories at your table. A big part of that is making sure that while maybe comfort isn't the right word, your players are always feeling safe in that experience, and they feel safe exploring that moral ambiguity. Discuss this in your session 0. Don't start a game that's going to have your players embrace evil and become darker characters for whatever reason if the players themselves aren't on board and consenting to engage in that sort of a story. Remember how important it is to be able to consent in those types of things and have tools available at your table if any of the narrative or any of the story becomes too dark or too much for your players. Include things like game ratings or X cards or other things that might allow you the opportunity to stop the narrative where it is and sort of pivot or change things from being a line to a veil. What is going to be the avenue for your players to let you as a dungeon master know that they want the story to evolve a little bit differently, or they want to stop exploring that particular topic in the context of that game, or even just need a moment to take a break. So let's go ahead and head over to Tricks of the Trade. Today in Tricks of the Trade, I want to discuss 5 ideas for how a hero could become a villain. What could their fall from grace be? So the first idea is betrayal and loss. The hero could experience a profound betrayal by someone they trusted or a devastating personal loss. They could become consumed by anger, grief, and a desire for revenge, forsaking their moral compass and embarking on a path of vengeance, gradually transforming into a ruthless or morally ambiguous figure. Secondly, the idea of the corruption of power. The hero could attain a position of great power or influence, which can begin to corrupt their sense of righteousness. The temptations and privileges that come with their newfound status could lead them to make morally compromising decisions, gradually eroding their original ideals and transforming them into a power-hungry or tyrannical figure. Next, the ends justify the means. So the character could be faced with an existential threat or a dire situation. The hero could become convinced that extreme measures would be necessary to ensure the greater good. They abandon their ethical boundaries, resorting to questionable tactics, manipulation, or even acts of cruelty as they believe the ends justify any means. Next is moral relativism. The hero could be exposed to different cultural perspectives, ideologies, or philosophies that challenge their preconceived notions of right and wrong. This exposure could then lead them into a moral crisis as they question the validity of their own beliefs. Ultimately, they embrace a morally relativistic viewpoint, allowing them to justify actions that they once considered villainous. And finally, self-righteousness and hubris. Over time, the hero's successes and victories could feed their ego, leading them to an inflated sense of self-righteousness and arrogance. They could become convinced in their own moral superiority, dismissing dissenting viewpoints and refusing to acknowledge their own flaws. This unchecked hubris could blind them to the consequences of their own actions, and they begin to cross ethical boundaries without remorse. Now, remember, these are just some ideas, and the specifics of how a hero could become a villain can vary greatly depending on your game, the characters, and the narrative context. It's essential to explore the character's motivations, emotions, and internal struggles throughout a transformation such as this, creating a compelling and complex journey from hero to villain. Now, I will also say on a personal note that this path, this fall from grace, is something that has personally fascinated me as a DM for a long time, and I have been working on an adventurer module that will do just that, put characters on a series of basically no-win scenarios where they're forced to choose between the greater of two evils. But the whole point of that is that they're still being forced to choose between evils, and ultimately, their road to hell, their path of falling from grace, is going to be paved with good intentions, as the saying goes. And I just think that's a really fun way to experience and explore a bunch of these moral nuances. So let's go ahead and head over to our knowledge check. For our knowledge check today, I want to look at an article that comes to us from the George Lucas Educational Foundation, and it is called The Benefits of Teaching Ethical Dilemmas by Laura Lee. And this article talks about how teaching ethics can not only help students become better decision makers, but it also helps develop crucial academic and social and emotional competencies. One of the key things that it points out is that introducing ethical dilemmas in the classroom, or for our case, we're going to be talking about in a role-playing game, is that it can open up opportunities not only for debate, but for critical thinking. And it also can help foster personal growth and empathy for other viewpoints, as well as self-reflection. One of the key ideas in this is you want to provide an opportunity for people to search and evaluate their own assumptions and to excavate the reasons behind those assumptions, to examine without prejudice another's opinion and to make a thoughtful decision with confidence. Now, if we're talking about a scenario of falling from grace, the scenarios we're going to be presenting our players are going to be a little less right and wrong and a little more which is more wrong. And I think that is where the interesting difference is going to be brought out. So they advocate using an idea called the ethical decision-making method as a guide. Now, in this framework, students would be presented with ethical decisions like, which one is going to be the lesser of two evils, which can be the same sort of thing we're going to be presenting to our players, giving them the opportunity to dig deep into consideration of how to make a difficult decision, but also what values underlie the decision that is being made and what the eventual consequences of those decisions are going to be. The article goes on to talk about how exploring conflicts from different points of view and striving to understand the value behind an opinion can make people more empathetic to others. Identifying principles that comprise the foundation of beliefs, as well as guiding others to hone social and emotional competencies like self-awareness and social awareness are benefits of doing these sort of thought experiments with moral dilemmas or moral ambiguity. As always, you'll be able to find a link to this article in the show notes if you want to check out the whole thing and read up on what the George Lucas Foundation, which is, of course, a great foundation to talk about falling from grace, since their stories are so enriched with that idea. The story of Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader being chief amongst those popular culture stories of falling from grace. So it is a great example of the trajectory that you could lay out in a game. As always, I would encourage you, if you enjoy this show, to leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can always choose to follow us on Instagram. There you can find a link to our Linktree, where you can find all of our social links, as well as join our Patreon and become a supporting member as an official Cyclithid, which really, really helps us out. And until next time, my friends, I will see you next session.